I'm just checking, looking at eyes, looking at faces of people I know.
Hi, B. It's Karina.
Yeah, feel free to say hello, chime in.
Good
Karina, good to hear
afternoon,
you.
Barnaby.
Hello, Noah.
Hi, Barnaby.
Hi. Hi. What a
Hi,
day.
Barnaby.
Hi. Hi.
Hi,
Hey, Barnaby.
Barnaby.
Okay, good. We're all here. Well, have I set up a situation for you? And I'm going to apologize beforehand so nobody takes it personally. If there are people here from the New York City Department of Education from the Yoga Mindfulness Teacher Training Program, which is the first yoga mindfulness training program for an inner city, and I sprung a situation on those folks too, so they know what I'm talking about. I mean, I'm creating a situation where I'm going to invite you to engage in the creation of something that I've actually already spoken to Tracy about. And we are going to come to terms with a question. And so already I'm going to ask you to put on your as if hats, your imagination, your mindfulness hats. And we are going to see what emerges. Now, we don't have a lot of time. And part of how I'm setting this experience up, it's a mindfulness practice from the get-go, so you might want to just start taking deep breaths right now, or mindfulness breaths, on the spot insanity happening to you right now. And consider, if you're here, then you know what I wrote in the description of this session. And I want to explain, if you don't know what this session was for, why, briefly, the session is the way it is. So, in his inaugural address on January 20th, 2021, President Biden became the first president in American history to name the social injustice of white supremacy, among other forms of oppression, quote, that we must confront and defeat. That moment exploded in me with the question, what is the role of mindfulness in the work of dismantling white supremacist structure and other forms of oppression in the social consciousness and activity of the world we hope to realize for our children? And so the question I'm asking you right from the get-go, and I'll give us time and space to investigate this, is how might we engage mindfulness as a form of inquiry to pay attention on purpose in a particular way to what emerges in our thoughts, our feelings, and our physical sensations when we mindfully investigate the work behind the work. Now, this is important because if you had just gone to the previous session in which Easton and Jersey were presenting, and look up their names, because it was a powerful presentation deeper into the real praxis of mindfulness and getting into the dialogical aspects of mindfulness, work that I've been reading about but waiting for people like Easton and Jersey, and they just did it in the last presentation. And that is the work, this kind of deep feeling work that we need to do, that talks about the praxis of mindfulness in the way that Freire talked about praxis. And they did such a brilliant job. It's recorded. You'll be able to find out about it. But what I want to do is work and do a kind of, in the honor of Jewel, who, if you saw her earlier today, talked about how her mindfulness practice was journaling. That's how she emerged into mindfulness. It was through journaling, an academic project-based task that we might give to a student. And I'm going to invite some concepts for you to think about. I'm going to give you some time to sit with these things. But the completed writings that I'm going to invite you to stay with and sit with beyond this session and to email back to me will be, according to Tracy, and I believe her because she doesn't play, they will be writings that will be shared out in the chat books and newsletters of the COSM professional learning community. So, yes, there are many of you right here on this presentation who I've literally said many times, do you have the chapter titles to your book and have you started writing it yet? And I know I can see by faces I've asked you to get going because I believe this is serious business. So now I'm setting up a situation where if you're brand new, I'm asking you to think about this. And if you're somebody who I've been having this conversation with in the past, well, here, I've got you again. It's like green eggs and ham. Wherever you go, I'm going to be bringing the dish to you until you take a bite of it and see that it's okay. Because part of my position is that this is emerging in the academy. This is emerging in higher education. This is serious work now. And you are people who are going to have full lives and careers and do a lot of things. But one of the things I predict in the next 5 or 10 years is a lot of people are going to want to be talking to people like you. So imagine, suspend your disbelief. We're going to do a mindfulness imagination exercise. And so the question is what is the work behind the work? We know that the work is this intense, really using mindfulness to dig into the kind of liberatory pedagogy that Paulo Freire was talking about, that Henry Giroux was talking about, that even, all kinds of people have been talking about, but how do we blend the two? And imagine that we are here and that we are going to take on this task and that we are going to engage in a kind of writing, a mindfulness writing practice. Susan Piver, I don't know if you're aware of Susan Piver. She does a lot of mindfulness writing workshops, and we're going to do a little taste of that. We're going to talk about some concepts in relationship to what I'm talking to you about, and then we're going to sit with those concepts in a mindfulness practice. I'll guide it a little bit. Not much, though, because I can tell, I recognize a lot of these faces. You're all well, experienced. I may guide and remind you of terms, and then you're going to select one of the topics that I'm about to share with you and get a legal pad and get a pen. So if you don't have a pen or a piece of paper, you're going to need to get that. You can get up, you can walk away. For you folks in New York City, this is a day full of a lot of surprises. And for you folks who are wondering what's going on, I think it's public knowledge now. We've just been told that we're getting a new chancellor. So this is a powerful time for mindfulness and being able to respond mindfully on the spot. Now, everybody's got their writing utensils. I'm going to show you an image, if I can. My dear sister, Lauren Levine, is here, and she will tell me if you can see that.
Yes, we can, Barnaby.
See, yes, thank you. That's Lauren Levine. She might become the Deputy Chancellor for keeping people on track. She is an incredible gift to mindless people like myself. Colleague of mine for the DOE. Take a look at this now. Just take a look at the words. I'm thinking about the people in our country today, or the people in our world today, who are realizing something's wrong. When we come to this question of systems of oppression, or systems of inequity, or systems of white supremacy, they've gotten to the point in their own development where they're at that point where they go, oh yeah, I guess this is something that it's like they realize that it's an issue. They're still not sure what they're going to do about it, but they're like, they're at that crucible of, well, am I going to sweep this under the rug, or am I going to try to live a certain way where I deal with it but don't deal with it? Or am I really going to lean into this? And so I'm thinking, how do we help our brothers and sisters who are really coming from that space of, what are you talking about, white privilege? What are you talking about, oppression? Who's being oppressed? Where is the oppression? There's a lot of that going on in our world today. These issues of inequity, I mean, a lot of people, it does not exist for them, but for others it does. But they need help, and they're going to come looking to mindfulness teachers for help. So I'm thinking that such a person, and I'm using myself, I think, as a model, because I'm a white male in a white male supremacist society. And I'll be honest with you, I too had to go through a kind of cultural chemotherapy in waking up to the reality of this situation. And I now see it quite clearly, but it wasn't easy at first. And the first thing that I had to do was decide. I had to decide that it was an issue. And as I say these words, which can be concepts or can be whatever they mean to you, I invite you just to take them in and see how they land. Decide. Like, I'm deciding that I'm going to do something on some level around this imbalance that I see in the world. I don't know on what level or where it is or what my role is in it yet, but I've decided that I'm going to start doing this. Now, look, you know the story about the 3 frogs who decide to jump off the log. You come back later and there's 3 frogs sitting on the log. Just because they decided doesn't mean they did anything. So then there's deciding to learn. And so by learning, I mean, it's that first act. Maybe it's nothing more or less than when you walk into Barnes and Noble and you pick up a book, and it's a book that is going to force you to get into taking a look at the situation. Like, I picked up a book the other day called Me and White Supremacy. I decided this is something that has to be dealt with. A president of the United States is saying we have to do something about it. Me and white supremacy. So I want to learn. That's what I mean by learn. Now, practice. Practice means going from sort of how I'm thinking about it and talking about it to practicing it by coming back into the study of this situation. What are the things that a person of who's either the oppressor or the oppressed, or the white male supremacist, or the person who is not a racist, because certain people they can't be racist because racism requires a certain structure that entitles some and not others, and it goes on and on. But in some case, you're practicing learning. You're going to groups. You want to do more than just read about it and be a couch potato, but you want to engage in dialogue. Really, praxis, action and reflection. I've always loved the way practice and praxis are related. But practice. You want to practice what you preach. You want to get into an engaged relationship with this issue. And then the next word is investigate, which means that you've going to look closely into things like root cause. And it's not root cause analysis that you're encouraged to look at by an institution's way. It's you looking at, where are the root causes of oppression or where are the root causes of my wanting to come to some sense of ownership with this situation of there are some people who have and some people who have not. There are some people who are oppressed and some people who are not. There are some people. How do I investigate that in terms of my own direct, valid relationship with it? Investigate. I'm going to get down into it. And that's when you move into with a kind of intimate curiosity. And it's even when we sit in a mindfulness practice and we simply sit and investigate and do a kind of mindful inquiry for a certain amount of time around whatever comes up. And then we report, right? We do a mindfulness practice for 10 minutes or 20 minutes, and we're paying attention on purpose to what arises in the present moment without judging. And then people report. And this is what I love about a kind of protocol for this work. Different kinds of protocols and approaches to practice mindfulness as a form of critical inquiry, self-inquiry. And reporting is just basically, if you're in a group of 8 or more people or 4 or more people, people simply reporting what their experience was when they were practicing mindfulness. And this is based upon what I see in my world. I see people doing this in sanghas, in common spaces, in secular spaces. And, you sit and then you talk about what has arisen and people listen. So here's listening, and it's mindful listening. It's listening to learn. It's listening to absorb. It's listening to hold the space so that human being can talk about what came up for them. And it might be the first time in which that person is giving voice to a private or personal struggle, right? Because when you sit, there's no escape from thoughts, from feelings, from physical sensations. And 9 times out of 10, it's been my observation that people end up talking about the things that they are truly struggling with in their lives. And people listening to them in a certain way, a way that lets them know I'm not thinking about what I'm going to say. I'm not thinking about how I'm going to make this about me. I'm listening to give you the space to emerge in accordance with your being, with the struggle that you're having, based upon what you've connected with in your mindfulness practice that you were investigating. And then we discuss. We dialogue. We speak respectively and carefully and compassionately and empathically. It's that kind of thing where we say, I identified with that, or it's not judging. We're not discussing to say, oh, you should do this, or I know about that. It's to say, yes, I have that feeling too. I have that thought too. I have that physical sensation too. That kind of identification creates and cuts through this culture of otherness, or this culture of me isolating in my personal struggle, thinking that nobody can identify with what I'm going through. And then what happens is that this discussion translates a private struggle into a common issue, a common identification. And that discussion can lead towards a kind of collective awareness into perhaps a public issue that requires some kind of action for the higher good of all concerned. And then, if that action happens or if that action doesn't happen, certainly what needs to happen is it needs to be integrated. This experience that I'm offering this, I'm not attached to it. I conjured this up for this conversation just to get us into thinking about these things. But integrate, which also means embody, which means you walk away from it now. Go take a walk on the beach. Let's go eat dinner. Let's go do something different. Let's enjoy life and leave our brains alone so that our brains can do the things that our brains naturally do, which is integrate this. And then we do the cycle again. We decide, we learn, we practice, we investigate, we report, we listen, we discuss, we integrate. So I have, let me stop sharing this for a second. We have 56 people. Oh my Lord, I thought there were only going to be 10 people here. My. So here's what I'm going to invite you to do, because we are now going to co-write a spontaneous document. But before we do it, I would like to invite you to sit. And we'll sit for 10 minutes. I have till 3:55 on my clock, 2:55 on your clock. So I think we're okay. But I'd like to sit just for 10 minutes. And I want to say this to you as fellow human beings. Another reason why I wanted to come today to this conference just as a human being on the planet, not representing any particular institution, but just me, based upon what we've all been living through this past year. And I want to invite you to sit with me and to sit with one another and just hold this space together in this virtual space. And you could even sort of do the protocol yourself, but do it around the question of oppression, or do it around white supremacy, or do it around misogyny. Do it around the things that we know exist like a cancer in our species that we must change our minds about. Could be culture crisis, but just sit with it. All right, and I'm sharing this again. Can you see it? I'm gonna hope.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, good. See, that's me just automatically relying on. All right, here it is. So now I'm just going to invite you to sit calmly. You know how you need to sit when you practice mindfulness. You don't need me to describe the aspects of taking your seat. You know how, at this point, come to a place of stillness and silence. You could do a soft gaze, but holding the reality of the change that needs to happen in ourselves as human beings, the change that needs to happen in order to come to terms with oppression, the oppressor, the oppressed, white male supremacy, racism, misogyny, you name it. And sit with that. Give yourself permission just to sit and breathe. And there's something deep in you. The assumption is that you're yearning. There's a yearning in your heart that you wish you could begin to do something about this. And that yearning is like snowflakes that collect on a leaf. And the yearning develops over years of a lifetime. And you get to a certain point, for whatever reason, that the snow just slides off. It's that moment of, it's just a click, a moment of clarity. And you see things must change. But how? I'm just breathing. Thinking about your own life, where you are on this continuum. You could ask gentle questions of yourself. What have I decided? When have I decided? And anything that arises in your mind, any feeling that arises in your heart, any physical sensation is as it is, not to be judged. Maybe the decision is that I don't want to be oppressed anymore. Maybe it's an external or internal situation. There's no wrong way to begin to approach this question of oppression or the oppressor. You can do it from the inside out or the outside in. Deciding. Then to learn, where do I go to begin to learn about this issue? Maybe I'm afraid to ask anybody because I'm ashamed, or I'm afraid, or I'm confused. The messiness. But somehow you go to the bookstore, you buy a book, or you go to one of the many groups that are emerging all over the world now that are helping people understand these things. To learn about, how did racism happen? Where was it born? What's the story behind the construct? You study the history. Whatever, you're just learning. You're going to learn about this. And as you learn and you decide to keep learning, a kind of praxis, a practice emerges from it. You keep coming back. You keep wanting to learn. Maybe you become a teacher. You work in urban education, or maybe you become an activist, or whatever you decide to do. It's rooted in this decision to change the structures of oppression in this world. Even if it's an outrageous idea, how might we dismantle that? Not destroy it, but take it apart, piece by piece, with love and attention. And we keep coming back, and we investigate. We get settled into our practice. We can open up more. It becomes more intimate. It's an intimate curiosity. We don't know if it's internal or external now. We're just looking deeply, going, who's entitled? Who's not entitled? Who's oppressed? Who's not oppressed? You're breathing into that, leaning into the question, holding the space for the question. Paulo Freire said that both the oppressor and the oppressed were in need of liberation. They were both equally in a terrible situation. Maybe that's something that you sit with, and just sit with it and breathe into it, feel into it. And then we report, you report. Each one of us reports, and we listen, and we hold the space for that person. It doesn't matter what comes up. We together hold a space for a person to emerge in accordance with their being in relationship to what their thoughts are, what their feelings are, what their physical sensations are in relationship to oppression, the oppressor, either of myself or of others. And we listen. We listen mindfully, we breathe. We pay attention to that person as they speak. They can feel us paying attention to them. And each person shares and we listen. We're not thinking about our response. We're not thinking about how we identify. We're just taking them in. And then we discuss. We do this wonderful thing that human beings get to do. We get to have conversation, discourse, discussion. We can facilitate it with protocols to make sure that all voices are heard. We can take the space to say, I identify with that. We can do it in ways where we take care of each other while we discuss. And collective awarenesses can emerge from that discussion. Collective acceptance. A sense of awareness, acceptance, and then just the natural emergence of what is the activity? What is the action? Maybe it's a hug. Maybe it's a protest. Maybe it's letter writing campaign. Who knows? Maybe it's running for office. I don't know. But it comes out of us every time we do it. And then let it go. We leave ourselves alone. We let it integrate. We leave our brains and our hearts and our bodies alone. We rest. We lie on the beach. We take a walk. We relax. We relax. It's a professional practice to relax. So that it becomes embodied, whatever the outcome is of our journey around this wheel. It becomes something that's part of us. There's a sense of in community. So just sit with that for a few breaths. Concerning the question of dismantling systems of oppression, what does to decide have to do with it? What does to learn have to do with it? What does to practice have to do with it? What does to investigate have to do with it? What does to report have to do with it? What does listen have to do with it? What does discuss have to do with it? What does integrate have to do with it? And just pay attention. Notice There's no wrong response. We all know this. Paying attention to thoughts, feelings, physical sensations. Breathing in, take a deep breath or take a small breath, but breathe in. Wiggle your toes. You could open your eyes, raise your arms up. Take a look at the space that you're sitting in. Look at your home or your room or your office or your school. Who knows where anybody's sitting these days or where they are. Having sat and held that question now, I want you to take that piece of paper, take that pen, and choose one of these words. Hopefully, somebody will, and we could maybe even indicate in the chat to make sure we've got them all covered. Somebody takes decide or learn, practice, investigate, report. We won't assign them, but we'll trust that somehow each of these will be covered. And you might want to just indicate in the chat which one you're going to take. It's just the one that is gravitating towards you the most of those words. What's the one that's still in your head right now? There was decide, there was learn, there was practice, there was investigate, there was report. Report is hard, you know. Report is that open, vulnerable, just the facts, ma'am. What was your direct, valid experience? You know? And then discuss. We all know sometimes how hard it is to get people to discuss the things that are most hard to discuss. It's the greatest issue in our country right now. It's easy to talk with people who agree with you, as Pete Seeger said, but the real challenge is to find a way to talk with people who disagree with you. And then, of course, there's the leaving of ourselves alone. Integrate. Are we able to do that? Are we able, what does integrate mean in terms of, an embodied sort of commitment to doing something about this situation that clearly, I don't know about you, but the last year has definitely told me that we have got to learn how to get along with each other. We have to coexist or not exist. And that means we might want to investigate what it means to care and love for one another, since all of our major religions talk about that. And this is not a religious practice. This is just, just the situation that we're in, and climate change, and the relationship of climate change. So you've each chosen a word. Now, for 10 minutes, here's what I want you to do. Write your name. This is like me being a teacher when I first taught, my first teaching job was Rikers Island. Take a piece of paper, write your name, write the date, the title of this article that you're contributing to is On Dismantling Structures of Oppression. Wow, it sounds like a PhD. You're all going to be teaching at a university. On Dismantling Structures of Oppression. And of course, do whatever you want with that. Change it, twist it, make it your own. But your word is that you're going to write spontaneously and freely for the next 10 to 12 minutes, just stream of consciousness, whatever comes up in you regarding the relationship of the word that you chose to that topic. There are no rules. You must write. This is what Jewel, by the way, was doing, I believe, when she discovered mindfulness. She just started writing. She didn't even know how to spell. She said it when we spoke. She just had to write. And writing became a mindfulness practice. So I want you to write now, just on the word that you've chosen. And we'll do it quietly as if it's a mindfulness practice. And I'll watch the clock. And notice. You need to notice, how is your body as you do this? How does your body feel? What are the thoughts? What are the feelings? What are the physical sensations? Making sure you breathe, decide, learn, practice, investigate, report, listen, discuss, integrate. Notice how your hand holds the pencil or the pen or the keyboard. Look up and notice how we're all in this together. It's a collective practice. You have a lot of time. You have 7 minutes. Explore what's going on with yourself. Write how your body feels in relationship to the question or the word. Write emotions. Write poetry. But just keep on writing whatever comes up. Like a river. Don't judge. Just let it flow. Non-judgmentally. Breathe. How honest can you be with yourself I'm not reading it right now. Maybe it's a struggle, so write about the struggle. Maybe it's a block, so write about the block. Maybe it's a gushing well. Write about that. Again, concerning the question of dismantling systems of oppression, to decide, to learn, to practice, to investigate, to report, to listen, to discuss, to integrate. About 3 more minutes. Two more minutes. As if the breath comes into your body, and when you exhale, it comes out through the pen or the pencil. Or a whole lifetime of thinking about this issue. 1 more minute. This is you paying attention to you. Okay. Lay the pen down. The exam is over. You've all graduated with honors. Please put the pen down. Imagine now, just for fun, you've been given $10,000 to go wherever you need to go or do whatever you need to do to integrate, right? Since integrate is leaving ourselves alone. So in an appropriate way, put down in the chat what you're doing to integrate. Are you going to the beach? Are you going to go have dinner? What do you do to leave yourself alone and go have fun? Dancing. Ah, yes. What are the things that when we integrate, it's like giving it the space? Playing basketball, hike in the woods. These are the very powerful things. Date night. Wow. Drive, bask in the sun. Yes, yeah. Cooking, hiking. Love it. Rock out to Jewel. Hiking. Yeah, man. Now, we've got 4 minutes left. Let me tell you what's going to happen next, since this must end at 3:55. Please notice the email. Here, look, Barnaby. This is important. omdrala@aol.com. Yes, I'm old school. I'm that old. I don't mind saying it. If you choose to accept this mission, and this could seem like mission impossible, but I think this is mission very possible and very needing to happen. You will take what you have written and you will expand. You will develop it. You will sit with it. And you will not abandon yourself, right? And put it up in a file someplace. You might. It's okay. Don't worry. It's not like, we don't want to freak anybody out. But when I told Tracy I was going to do this practice, she said, that is so great, and we'll publish whatever they write. So, write it. Who? This is an emerging field. Who's writing? I mean, this could be the first chapter for your book or something, or for your dissertation. I mean, write it. It's you, and you've been engaged in this work in some way, shape, or form, and we'll have this what's the word? A cornucopia, or a mandala, or a whole continuum of responses, and then we'll say that this is what we did, and I'll take all the blame. If it's for anything bad, like if there's any bad, I'll take the blame, but all good, all credit will go to everybody who contributes and shows up and sends in, because writing about, putting it in writing, is a deep act of commitment. I believe that. I feel that I've learned this from Jewel, who's not some great guru mindfulness teacher. If you talk to her, she turns out she's this kid who has this voice, who was abused by her father. By the way, that's the Kilcher family that you see on the Alaskan Frontier, the TV show. That's her family. So she wasn't just getting abused. She was living in the wild, man. And somehow found a way to get herself to California. And she was journaling just to keep herself from, I think she pretty much alluded to it, killing herself, because she was feeling suicidal. She mentioned that. And here she could, and think of our kids, think of your own kids, think of you, maybe. This is a powerful year. And so it's 3:54. We didn't get to debrief about how you felt about that, because I wanted to get this done, but we can take a couple minutes and debrief. If anybody would like to just make a comment, feel free to unmute yourself. Nobody can unmute themselves. I'm supposed to be able to let you unmute yourselves, right? Of course, I
can
don't
unmute
know
myself. It's
Oh.
okay.
Oh, beautiful. Go ahead.
No, Barnaby, this was even after coming off the session before this, it's another dive. It's another deep dive in where you're at. And the wheel kind of helps categorize the different stages we're at, and I appreciate that. But yeah, this is maybe not so much the start of the next book, but it's the start of the project, or where I'm at currently in working with people in my community and people that I know and love. So thank you.
Beautiful. Anybody else? You can unmute yourself and just chime in.
I really appreciate having the wheel because my district's just starting to even acknowledge that there's any kind of white supremacy and I feel like we're stuck in the book club cycle, which is great to read, but there's no planned next steps. So I feel like bringing this wheel in will help kind of get us to make those harder decisions, make those harder moves to make progress for our students.
Beautiful. And just so you know, I claim no ownership of the wheel. You can take the wheel, and if you think there's a better word, but we have to break it down in the same way that we break down the actual mindfulness practice, or when you're working with a good yoga teacher who literally teaches you each step of the way. How about one more?
I'll speak, Barnaby. I've been this looking at the wheel, and this practice has given me the collective energy of this group to take my work forward. I've been looking at the oppression of having a disability label.
Oh,
And what that does to kids. You add on all the other, racial and sexual things on top of it. But if you have a disability label, it's so oppressive, and people don't talk about it. And I'm committed to changing that. So I accept your challenge. You will get a section from me. And thank you for this opportunity.
Amy, thank you. So we'll end on that. Amy has given us the exit ticket. So the exit ticket is you either click leave and God bless you, or before you leave, you type in, I accept. Let's see who's going to put their character. Oh, okay. Let me see. I accept. That's Jennifer. That's Ashley. That's Karina. That's Mia, Gloria, Megan. Come on. If we all get this together, we could all retire. Who knows? They'll make a movie. No, I don't know. That's my imagination. Rebecca's iPad, Noah, Laws, Bunny, Laura. Beautiful. Keep on going. Don't hold back. It's now or never. If we don't do the work, who's going to do it? And Tracy will write a great intro. A group of educators responded to this issue after Joseph Biden, our president, announced. And then this is like, who else is composing a response like this? This is how this stuff happens. All right. It's 3:58. That's right. Look at what Amy said. Each one speaks separately as one united voice. Well, I'm grateful to you. I think you probably have an idea of how I feel about you. Yeah, Susan Piver. She does great retreats on mindful writing. But look, there's teachers on this Zoom here right now who do some great things. I could sit with Jane Marie Kapitanakis or Jamie Whitney or Lauren Levine or Stephen Stroll. These are like brothers and sisters of mine from New York City. So if they're not protecting me from, the subway system, they're teaching me how to be a good teacher, I hope you go on to your next session and you have my email. And email me, because this to me is about something larger than myself, and I want to get up for it every day.